In this lesson, I'm going to go over what ES6 is in JavaScript and how you'll be expected to update your code pens and your current JavaScripts to be ES6 compliant or formatted. So ES6 is the modern version of JavaScript. It's also called ECMA 2015. And it's just the same JavaScript that you've known, it's just a different type of formatting. And it's more modern in the fact that there's more functionalities than the old school type of JavaScript. Let's call that pre-2015. It's a lot more object-oriented. But if you download this ES6.zip file, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I'd like to take you on a little tour of that. So what I'm going to do is minimize this, and I've opened up my my code, and I'm going to make sure that this entire thing is also in a available in a browser. So first thing I'm going to do is just open up Chrome, and we'll just work inside of Chrome. And I'm going to keep my DevTools open. And first thing I'd like to talk about is the difference between variable declarations. Now, if you took WebD 170, you were learning entry-level JavaScript. And if you pitch yourself as a more experienced developer, you're going to want to convert your code into ES6. So that means your variable declarations need to be a little bit more modern, a little bit more sophisticated. So what I have here is one let. So there are three types of variable declarations. There's a let, a const, and then the old var. So let allows us to do certain things. Let is similar to var, but let actually has scope. It's accessible only inside the block level it is defined. So if I do something like this, and I have let a equals 40 in console.log a, this would not be defined outside of it. In fact, if we go to our Chrome, we see that a is not defined. So it's very true that it's not. So as you can see, I have the comment here, not accessible. But down here below, we have A and B, and that's outside the code block. If true, let A, C, so A would be 60 and C would be 10. So 60 divided by 10 is 6, but B divided by C, B is 100 and C is 10. B has value as well. So if we look at line 20 here, it's if you see C has a var, and that's why the C is accessible. So let's take another look at this at the bottom. We see 6, 10, 10, 50, and it's absolutely accurate. It's got the var, which is available outside, and like here, if we log C, it's equal to 10 because it's var. Log A, it's equal to 50 because it's outside. So that tells you a little bit about let. It all has to do with the code block. So if you go through your code, whatever snippets you'll be gathering in the upcoming weeks, you can make sure that each one of them has their proper variable declaration. So on to the next script here. This is const. A const is used to assign a constant value to the variable that will never be changed. So we use this for things like pi, things like 3.14, things that aren't changing. So in this case, we have A60. We'll see that it shows an error. So let me pop this open inside my ES6 folder. And I really want you to play with this. If you're really serious about getting a job, you're going to want to convert your code to this. So you see the errors right here. And we can go back. And one thing I'd like to bring up is that you have an error here and an error here because you changed it. But one thing about the arrays, like right now I have a language of arrays, and I can't just change that value. But what I can do is push something onto that array, and that would work fine. So if I do that and I look at my console.log, you'll see, well, you're going to see these errors come out first, but if I comment out those errors, comment, save, and go back and refresh, oh, I still got another one, 10, yeah, that's the third one. Because we're changing that array and you can't do that. But you can alter the array. And what I mean by that is you can push something on the end of it. So right now if I do this and I do my console, there's the new array. Everything looks good, right? Because I pushed Java onto the end of it. So you can change arrays if you use array methods. But const is used for constant values. So if you ever have a constant value that doesn't change, just use const. And your code will look good. Let's move on to the next one here. This is the third most popular change in the difference between old school JavaScript and ES6. And these are identical type functions, but look at this. This is the old way you learned. And in this case, you have a variable, new one, that equals, and you see the empty the empty parentheses with the arrow syntax, and that's a function. So there are two parts. The variable declaration equaling the function parentheses, and then the second part. The second part is declaring the body part of the function. The arrow part with the curly braces defines the body part. So if we do something like this, let new one with parameters with 2 arguments, we can console.log that, and you'll see it'll add up to 30. So let's take a quick look at our arrow script. So there's the 30 right there. So these are the top 3 things that I would dive into your code portfolio to change. Now let's talk about default parameters. And all that means is that when we send an argument like this, you see how A would be equal to 20? Well, there is no B here. So B equals 10. And that's why 20 plus 10 equals 30. This right here at the top is called a default parameter, and it's used when there's not a value sent. So when we take another look at something like, and this is the arrow syntax, but something like this, you've got A equals 10 and B, and in this case, the default parameter needs to be on the second argument. So the second parameter places the default parameter. This would not work. So when you're calling the function with parameters, they get assigned in order. The first value gets assigned to the first parameter, the second value gets assigned to the second, and so on. So the 20 in here gets assigned to parameter A, and B is not having any values, so there's no output at all because there was nothing there. That's why that's a problem. So 20 and nothing in B. So these are default parameters which are new to ES6. If you've had PHP, you'll understand that PHP does something almost identical. The big difference is the arrow syntax with this. So that is the default arguments for things. Now let's move on to the for loop. The for loop is a very interesting thing in ES6. And in this case, we have an example right here. We have an array of 4 numbers, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And then we have a for loop around that array. So we're saying let value of the R and console.log the value, and that'll be fine. But there's more to be had here, and I'll go ahead and type in the for loop so we can see it. And here you see at the top the 2, 3, 4, and 1, which is the top array, but then you also see JavaScript below. So let's look at the code that put that out. So there's our for loop, pretty easy. The value of, let of, and remember let is the code block. So here we have a string, and we're saying let character of string and console.log the character, so that's each one. So we're actually treating this like an array, and in fact, it actually is. If I did console.log string, string and a 0, we should get a capital J out of that. Even though it is a string, it acts like an array with letters, so watch. If we do this, we should get a double J, and there's the double J for that. So that is the for loop that has a let of. So it's got a slight modification, and it returns all the elements, not their index. If you need the index, don't use this. Use a for in or something like that, or a for each. But a for loop would work fine for just outputting members of an array. All right, a couple more things. Don't want to overwhelm you, but when we look at code portfolios from people, we are looking for things that are new and things that are ES6 based. So I would say as we get close to getting your portfolios together and you go through your code, start to think about updating for this. And in a couple of weeks there will be an assignment for getting all your code together so I can have a look at it and improve it for you and talk about talking points for an interview. But for now, I would focus on the top 5 here. The spread is a little bit more unique. So what spreads do, it'll give you an idea here. You've got a sum of elements which equals an array. We can log that array, and we have a for loop here. We can kind of check it out. So that this let's just take a look in the browser. So this is our spread attributes, and we see the top is the 10, 20, 40, 60, 90, And that makes sense. We've got some elements, which is the function, and we're passing the array to right here, and we log it, and we loop through it, and just sum it out, which is good. Now let's take the spread attribute, which is this. In this case, we didn't pass the array at all. We passed 5 numbers. And by adding the spreader here, it turned these 5 numbers into an array that can be looped through. And we can still do things like, math max, returning a 200. That's a new thing. We can do, you can't do an array with a max. But if you were to spread the array like this, then you could do the max. So the spread is the 3 dots, and it's quite handy for just outputting arrays in a very simple fashion. It works very well with the for loop. So that is that one. Now there's only a few more. There's 7 maps, 8 static, and getter setters, but it does take a long time to learn this. If you have not had the WebD 171 class, the new one in the curriculum, I would definitely check that out, because we were teaching React and Angular in there, and this is part of it. So this is the map function, and this is basically creating a key value pair. If you know PHP, it's almost like an associative array. So in this case, we have a new map and .set, and we're setting key value, key value, key value, key value. In this case, we have the get, so we're getting John. In this case, we're getting the ID, and in interest, we're getting the array back. So we're setting and getting those values. So in this case, all the indexes are unique, so we can use any value as a key or a value. So in this case, I'm setting name to be John, name to be Andy. Now, since it has to be unique, there is no more John at this point. So if I do number 1 or not a number, no value, and get the name, we'd get Andy. 1 would be number 1, which is this, and NaN would be no value. So mapping is all about setting key values and not creating persistent storage per se, but creating a token basically that can be recalled for a value. So here we go with another map. Name John, ID 10. This has a size. So similar to an array, the map has a way to measure. We have keys, so we can output name and ID. We have values, which would output the values. And we can also for loop around those. So I'm going to go ahead and take another quick look at, this is the spread, but let's look at the map. So we've got name ID here, as you can see. And there's more too. You can console.log each and every element. We can let key value of map and break it apart because there are key value pairs. This would be like the for each loop in PHP if you're familiar with it. But the map is an important part of what's new to ES6. Now there are just a couple more that I'll go over that indicate how object-oriented JavaScript's becoming. And this is going to look very similar to PHP. If you ever get this far with object-oriented programming, we have the class example and a static call me. So usually what you'd see in a class in other languages is the function, but we have a static methods now. So you can create any method without creating an instance of the class. If you aren't familiar with it, don't be frightened. It's just a path of discovery. This will not be in your code portfolio, more than likely. More than likely, you're going to be doing something procedural and updating it to ES6. Now, the last one here is getters and setters. If you ever had Java, this will make sense to you. We've kind of already done this with the map, with set and get. And this is the way to reduce responsibility. So JavaScript now has constructors, which means that they're functions or methods that run when the class is called. But there's get names and set names. So here's a good example. If I let a person equal new people, which is a new class, there should be a class called people up here, then we've got a constructor, which means this name would be equal to Jon Snow. So I can log person.getName, and it will return that name, and I can return person get name after resetting it to Danny. So let's take a look at that in a browser, but it's gotten very object-oriented with the latest releases of JavaScript. Okay, so we are here, and we're going to go to getters and setters. You see Jon Snow and Danny, which is exactly right. So, and we have this class people, which is going to throw an error because we've already got the class up here. So I can go ahead and comment this out. And down here we have let person equals new people Jon Snow, console.log person.name, person.name, and now we have almost the same thing. It's just not a get name or set name. We've got the word get, the keyword set. So this would make you look very good in your code portfolio. Anything in this folder would be handy, but I would ask that you get to know it. And if you haven't taken Angular or React yet, mastery of this this folder will help. We actually have one more here. It's called sets, and sets are almost like maps, but they store unique values of any type. So basically, if I do sets add B and A, we're adding duplicate value. And let's go and take a look at this real quick. Number 10 snuck past me there. So your sets, and we see A and B in our loop. So again, it's only for uniqueness. So this A never got added. Now, with no duplicate values are displayed, unique values are displayed, and also the sets are iterable objects, so we have to iterate through other useful methods. So I have an error right here that says unexpected identifier on line 15. Let's go ahead and check that out. So I have a new set. There we go, new set, like this with those values. And then we have a size. Let's see if we run this back. And I don't think anything's logged yet, but we have 5. We can console.log that. Console, oops. We can console.log whether it's true or 1. So that has function is a very handy thing for these sets. And you see there's 5 right there. So that because that was our size that we logged. So sets are a little bit different. They're like maps, but they don't have keys and values. But you can loop around them, and they're always unique. So a lot of new things coming out in JavaScript that you might want to get a hold of, because this is the language to show for getting work in web development.